Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of In the Chute. I have no idea what you're going to throw at me today, but I guess maybe now I am. What is it?
All right. So after some technical difficulties, we are going to go into actually a throwback. So we normally have a new idea or topic each time we have this discussion, but looking back at some of our older films or older videos, they weren't really as good as what I've been able to do since then. And we're not polished by any means, but we're better than we used to be. So I'm gonna go back and circle around. We might do this again in a year or so when we get even that much better because we want to keep producing good content. So the real question is gonna be our second, I think it was in the Chute, asked why do we have Red Angus on the ranch? So I'm gonna say that again. Why does the Hashknife Ranch have Red Angus? And like, why do we keep them around? Is that going to change at all in the future?
Good question. They're red because they're not black.
Thanks.
Hey, no problem. I'm here for you. We just like the reds. The disposition is fantastic. They're not near as aggressive as the blacks tend to be, and those are kind of relative to their herd in general. I mean, you have some individuals that are can be a little bit aggressive, but for the most part, they're not. A lot of the blacks are primarily a little bit more aggressive. They're all very protective. It doesn't matter, I don't think, what breed it is. When a mother has got a newborn, they're protective. So you gotta look past that, or accept that for what it is and be thankful that they are, because they're gonna protect that baby. Heat stress in the summertime is a big one. We've had this last year we had a really hot summer, and a couple of reasons, I think, maybe that we had our cows breed up and had a very low number that were dry. We only had 2 dries out of the whole bunch. One's a heifer, first time heifer, so there may be some fertility issues. That's not uncommon. But one was an older cow, and her middle-aged cow, I should say. She's like 6 years old, but she's had twins 2 years in a row. So I can maybe explain that way. But when you compare the number of dries that we had compared to some of the neighbors, and this is all over the place, and they are running primarily black. There are some of them are running 10%, 8%, some up to almost 25% dry last year. And
because of the drought, the lack of water,
the heat is a big deal. Animals don't, those bulls don't want to work when they're overheated, and black hide is a lot more thermal type of impact, I should say, than the reds. So that's one reason.
And to add to that,
like that,
most people don't realize where the ranch is located. There's not very much for vegetation. There's maybe some coulees and some kind of troughs in a sense in the ground, but there's no actual trees or anything really.
Right.
There you might have an occasional cottonwood, but that's so few and far between that's part of the reason why the animals can't get out of the sun, and that's probably why they bake with the darker hide and not so much with the red hide. But yeah, keep going.
But heat's heat too. Even if you had shade, heat is heat. Yeah. So you're right, it does help. I mean, you'll sure drop the temperature, the ambient temperature, when you're in the shade, and they try to find shade, or they'll try to find a coulee to kind of get into, or a cliff overhang, that's going to kind of shade them a little bit if they can. So, and certainly stay by the water. They'll hang out by that spring if they can, and it's running full water out, then that helps them. But still, it's a big deal. Disposition's one. That whole problem with heat with a different colored hide is another. Just those are the 2 main ones, really. We just really like those reds. We pay for it in our marketing, because the Black Angus Association has done, as we've said before, a brilliant job of marketing those black cattle. So you never know. We like them. I was just talking to a guy here not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, that he's got reds as well. And I was asking about his marketing, and I was selling his cattle, his calves, and he's, why are you considering going to some black to try to take advantage of that, some of those premium type markets? And he goes, nope, sticking with my reds. Love my reds. I love that. Him and his wife are, they're 10 years older than I am, at least. And he says, you know what? It's just the 2 of us, and we can work those cattle and we can work them safely. I don't worry about these red cows and being in a tight spot in a corral and my wife being able to be in there
Yeah.
and not get taken. That's a big deal. It really is. I
Well,
mean,
and ultimately that's a cost in itself too, right? If you do get
yeah,
charged or kind of messed up with the
or
cow,
killed.
or killed. I mean, other than that, yeah.
Yeah,
Hospital bills and stuff like that can a couple $1,000. Well, is that really worth the cow?
right.
Uh,
Right. No, it is. And you don't think of it like that quite, but it brings up a good point that, man, I've been taken by cow, um, not just once, but I mean, it can happen. And I mean, I've been in some herds that were crossbred black. It was kind of a wreck that, guy that was helping out and my grandpa was working for, they brought these cattle in and you did not get off your horse. Do not get off your horse. That was the rule. And you couldn't, because those cattle would, I mean, they would take advantage and they would take you. And they were, they had been brought in. They were, on shares on grass. Very good lesson for me as a real young kid, 10, 11 years old. Stay on your horse. Never leave your wingman.
yeah.
So, you don't have to work cattle like that. You don't have to be around cattle like that. And we've talked about that, but then I think we get a little bit to the, I won't call it greedy side, but it's desperation about, hey, how could we get more money out of these cattle that we're losing money on, especially the last 2 years. And, you start, and I've mentioned this, do we start buying some black bulls and start putting with our cows? And they'd be a great crossbreed like that. I mean, there's some good cross genetics that would take place, but um, what are you going to get? Do you want to go that direction? You want to start phasing out the reds, and I don't want to do that. So everybody's in the same spot as we are. Even everybody. It doesn't matter what breed or what color your cattle are. Right now is a tough spot. Has been for a while with the price of beef for a consumer, and we're not seeing it as a producer. So there's that middleman in the center there that is finally getting some attention on it. But I'm not hopeful that anything will happen. They'll, like everything else, they'll talk a good game and talk it to death, and they'll put in a couple of, hey, we must do this. Well, we must educate. Okay, how do you do that? You educate it that this is what's happening, and you don't change it.
Well, I,
So
I think you made a good point. You're saying, it might be greedy. I disagree. It's not greed. It's I mean, we've had this discussion before. It's a business decision. It's a
right,
family business. People look at it as like, oh, it's just ranching or it's just farming. It's a business decision. So what's
right,
the best way to profit and try to at least bring some sort of money inflow when we've been doing outflow really, really bad for the last couple of years? Like that's one way of doing it. But you're saying we're not going to do that. The other question is, we're about halfway through. What is it that brought us to the Reds? So we've never had, we didn't have Reds always. We have Red Angus now,
right.
but we didn't always have that in the past in the family. So what brought us to where we are today?
That's a good question. Also, when I was a kid, everybody had Herefords. I mean, that
Yeah.
was the predominant breed. And there's issues with Herefords. There's issues with every breed. It isn't like there's one that's, you know, the standout and the perfect breed to have, because there's not. There's good breeds, there's good attributes to all of them. There's some poor ones to all of them too. So um had Herefords for years. The blacks started moving in as an influence and went, well, those are some pretty good animals. One, they don't have any horns on them. There's no horn maintenance on
Yeah.
these Angus cattle. They're polled. They have not have nothing. So that's a good thing. Sometimes when you crossbreed, then you'll start seeing some horns in your blacks. But that's part of what you get with your crossbreed. You may or may not have some of the desirable traits to them. You cull back and then you start selectively breeding for your desirable traits and getting rid of your undesirable ones. But the blacks started coming in, and we had blacks as well. So that's not really a big surprise there that we would go to blacks. Black baldies, had a lot of black baldies, and that is a true indication of whether or not your animals are crossbred or not. And so you're taking Hereford and crossing it with a Angus, and you're going to get a black-hided animal with a white face, or brockle color or brockle, which is just kind of a big giant freckle, I guess, just blotches on their faces. So you'll get that. They're called baldies, and great genetic traits of both. And again, you're going to call out those that have the horns on them, or the traits that are not desirable. And we did that. We'd have to, either dehorn what we had, because you're going to raise them to calves and they're going to grow those horns out. And then any of the heifers that you kept back, you would keep the ones that were not going to have horns on them, so that you could selectively breed those. And then their progeny, same way, you just keep whittling that back to where you've got all polled animals. So, and then we basically had sold all of the cattle. Grandpa sold them all, retired. Was a family deal where somebody else takes that ranch over and then promptly sells it. So after they use it a little while, and then when we got back into buying some of these cattle back, your grandpa did, my dad, then went with the Reds. And was talking to his stepdad, and he goes, "Man, those Reds are some nice animals." And had some local breeders that were very good, very reputable, still are very reputable. In fact, as I buy some bulls from them occasionally, produce some good stuff. And they're only about 30 miles up the creek. Quick, easy, nice. And I try to buy local anyway, watch those genetics so that they're spread around. And got back into the Reds, and we haven't went back since. And that's been over, oh my goodness, I bet you we're looking at 30 years, 25, 30 years that we've had Reds now.
Growing up, I'm coming up on 28. I don't remember ever seeing anything other than Reds on the place. So
yeah. So that's just what happens. And things will change, or can change. And we may be forced out of the Reds. I mean, it may become to where it's not viable, because an extra nickel a pound on an animal will keep you from losing money to at least breaking even. And that's what we hope for, is that we can at least break even, keep our bellies full and keep going. I know it doesn't sound right. That's not the greatest business model, with what you should be making, what, a 10-15% profit every year to stay viable, to ahead of taxes.
It depends on the product, but yeah.
It depends. Yeah. Product and area and all of that. I mean, there's lots of things that goes into that, but we hope that we can just keep going for another year.
Well, that is how we got to have Reds. That's why we have Reds, and the business decision so far is pending, but for now we'll be sticking with our Reds.
Yeah.
We'll put that one out to pasture.